Well, this review, obviously, is for Gabriel Knight's Sins of the Father, arguably one of the greatest classical adventure games in existence. The game came out in about 1993 and around about the same time as the innovation of the home computer CD-ROM that started to permeate the home PC market. Still, the CD wasn't so common that Gabriel Knight didn't need to also be released in a stripped-down version on floppy disk. The differences between these two versions are huge, and for the most part, if you're looking to play this game, there is no real choice but the CD version, which gives you full audio for the entire game, including narration and all conversations and everything, as well as some FMV dream sequences. Still, it's worth noting that this is before Under a Killing Moon had made its big splash and full motion video of live action actors had become completely pervasive in the adventure game genre. Instead, this is kind of like a testament to the old traditional style of adventure games that had been developing at Sierra from the times that King's Quest moved the adventure games from graphic representations of scenes like, say, Dark Crystal, to actual characters that the player could physically control and move throughout the game world. This was also the first Sierra game to really utilize the 386 processor code, and this added power let them release true 256 color VGA graphics to a standard that they haven't ever really achieved before this. And in its day, it was definitely the best thing Sierra could provide, and it was near the best thing you could get. And the art itself it's kind of like dark, full of disturbing images and nightmarish delusions and stuff. The kind of thing you'd expect of a story about, voodoo and monsters and horror. The awesome and, sometimes quite graphic art is actually still pretty effective today. In fact, I think it's a tribute to the artists that their work is so visually interesting and pleasing to look at after all this time. If you're playing the CD version of this game, the characters are going to be brought to life through very talented voice acting, directed by a man named Stuart M. Rosen, who has won several awards for his voice coaching and voice direction skills.
Cop author photo might be nice.
You and me? Together?
Why not? Of course, you'll have to try to tone down your masculinity. What can you tell me about voodoo?
Voodoo? Why would you want to know about that, detective? It's rather silly, isn't it?
There's nothing silly about the voodoo murders.
But that voodoo is faked. That's what I've read in the papers.
That's what the papers say, all right.
But you're not convinced?
No, frankly, I'm not. The police department isn't known for its imagination.
Oh. Well, I can see that your imagination is considerable.
Excuse me, sir?
What you need, boy?
Mind if I pick your brain a minute?
Go ahead. These folks ain't in no hurry.
Tell me something about St. Louis Cemetery, number 1.
You know why the dead are buried in tombs and not in the ground, don't you? The water table's too high. Them coffins would float right out of their graves. Them dead would go floating right down into the water. Cause if it's Mardi Gras, nobody'd even notice.
Teamed up with the likes of Mark Hamill, who's doing very well for himself, doing all sorts of voiceovers. You might know him as the Joker in the Batman cartoons. Of course, he's also Luke Skywalker. And Michael Dorn, who also does a lot of cartoons, and he played Worf in Next Gen. Anyway, this is an example of how voiceovers should really be done, putting most modern titles to shame. The star, of course, in Gabriel Knight is Gabriel Knight, and he's played by Tim Curry, and you'll be hearing his voice almost constantly throughout the game, so it's good that his performance is so good. Some people have criticised that his southern accent is sort of non-American and it's too put on, but as I'm not an American, I can't notice this, and to me, I personally found his deep narration to be a highlight of the game. But the real star is behind the scenes, and her name is Jensen. She's a 30-year-old game designer at the time who wrote and designed this game, and the great feat of this game was to draw from classical novel writing techniques. Unlike all the other Sierra games, Gabriel Knight was set in a world that you and I exist in today, and it used the real history of New Orleans and the origins of voodoo to build this very credible, if a little cliche, story. The sheer volume of this information can be a little bit daunting though. The conversation trees themselves are extremely long, and there's so many puzzle points and hints and clues, and in some cases game blocks until you find the information in the conversations that you really need to listen to them all. In truth, the game is a lot better when you do, but some of these conversations, as you can see from this video, take a long time, and it's worth noting that I've been to this guy a few times already. This is later in the game, so I've actually gone through about half of his conversation before this point. So every single character can take up to anywhere between 20 or 40 minutes just of conversation, and that can be a little bit tiresome to some players. The level of research in this game is staggering, and if you listen to all the conversations, and especially in the museum and the university, you're going to come away from this game with detailed and legitimate knowledge of the history of voodoo. This background information and the realism of the setting blend together to make the game story sit comfortably inside your barriers of suspension of disbelief, which in turn makes the horror angle of the game so much better because it's believable. And you know, as everyone knows, if you believe it's possible, then a horror is much more effective. So what is this game about? Basically, Gabriel Knight is a broke writer who owns a rare bookstore in the French Quarter of New Orleans and suffers from a debilitating recurring nightmare. Meanwhile, the city itself is currently focusing on a series of grisly murders that the press have termed the voodoo murders. Gabriel Knight, sensing a story here that he can turn into a new book and possibly make some cash, is researching the voodoo angle through his police friend Detective Mosley. Your task is to learn about voodoo and to uncover the truth of the voodoo killings. Yet as the game progresses, you soon find out that there is a deeper connection to Gabriel, and that these events take you all around the world and back again. The game runs through the Sierra Creative Interpreter, that's the SCI Interpreter version 2, which is the script engine that drives the game mechanics. And the majority of the game is told through conversational dialogue pieces. This is where you get most of your information about the plot and how it advances. Yet there are a few FMV sequences as well as some SCI scripted events. The game is mainly full of conversational linking quests, as in you are a detective basically and you have to find information from questioning people. Though there is quite a large amount of the standard item puzzles where you have to pick up said item and use it in a certain way to get a result. On top of that, there is a number of traditional puzzles, as in puzzle box puzzles, and these are actually quite difficult. Some would say too difficult. So be prepared to have a piece of paper handy and writing things down. This isn't a game you can just fly through in your head. Some of these puzzles are actually very, very difficult, which is part of the reason why this game is so good. It's much more adult, and the difficulty level reflects that.
Saying that his message isn't quite right. Gabriel rubs it off in frustration.
This difficulty level is really illustrated in the way the point and click interface works in this game. Rather than just having the standard click anywhere type of point and click that we were seeing in things like, say, King's Quest V, we've actually have the action icons split into all these different ones. While this seems a little bit superfluous at first glance, what it does is it forces the player to actually have an understanding of what they're doing, rather than just randomly clicking on things and trying items on stuff. I believe that they were trying to use icons to simulate the kind of detailed knowledge of the game you would need to use a text interface, like talk to, pick up, get, use. This same splitting of the icon is also inside the inventory. In addition, there's a neat feature where you actually carry around this tape recorder with you, and in this tape recorder you have all your conversations stored, which is very handy because they're so important.
Do you have messages for me?
Well, thanks for watching. Obviously, I really like this game, so I would recommend it to anyone who wants to play a classic adventure. And just for the record, this was my score. I'll see you next time I do one.